Today, we're going to be looking at the GoldSky Expert Advisor by Mr. Gregory Hay and his company Alno Markets Ltd. So Greg here has been on the marketplace for quite a few years by now, and he really has two different types of strategies, both of which are actually real strategies, and they seemingly come back every so often, sometimes under a different brand name or perhaps with some small tweaks. So this GoldSky EA, I believe, used to be called the Golden Energy Expert Advisor. I think it might be the same strategy, just given like the sales page and running a few back tests, but perhaps he's actually modified his previous one. So I'm curious to see how this one differs from some of his previous ones. What I've noticed about Greg and some of his bots is they always have a real strategy behind them. They're not grid martingales. However, he usually puts in like these pretty aggressive like one trade recovery functions. So like, for instance, most of his bots tend to have a very inverted risk reward. Like this one has a 90% win rate. It's almost guaranteed that it has an inverted risk reward, which is totally fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But quite often what he does is he also has like a second recovery function, whereas because the win rate is so high, after taking one loss, because the win rate is 90%, on the next trade, he'll usually scale the lot size so that supposedly that one trade would then recover 100% of the losses of the prior loser. The issue with that is this style of technique can also really blow up in your face if you suddenly have a different sequence of trades. So I actually did this myself for a bit in some of my bots because I actually learned this from Greg. I thought it was kind of cool, and I implemented that in some of my own. And I used to have a bot called the US Lightning back in the day, and it would pretty much trade a basic opening range breakout where it had an 80% win rate. And logically, for several months, you could say, well, if there's one loss on the next trade, perhaps you can double the lot size because it has an inverted 1-to-2 risk reward, and this should ensure you should always have a pretty smooth equity curve. The downside with that is when Trump got elected, all of a sudden, opening range breakouts, like the distribution of winners and losers changed massively, and then this style of system did not do super well, and ultimately I took off the recovery function and still like the actual style of system a lot. I love opening range breakouts. So all that to say, Greg usually makes really good bots, but I've also seen him kind of come and go off the marketplace, largely because of the recovery function, not because of his actual like initial strategy, more so because he goes a bit too aggressive on the recovery side of things. I'm not quite sure why he does that. Perhaps it just sells better on MQL5 to have that relatively smooth equity curve. But if I were to use his bots personally, I'd probably return that off just because it leaves you really susceptible to permutations in the order of trades. Because yes, like even if you have a system which looks great in a back test, that's usually because the trades were in a certain sequence, like loss, loss, win, 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 loss, loss, loss. If you were to like jumble that up, which is totally normal because you don't necessarily, or you're probably not going to have the exact same distribution of winners and losers going forward, even if the edge remains the same. Ultimately, that could cause a lot of issues if you use this style of like sequence-based recovery mechanism. So I think this is pretty similar to the Gold Energy, and I actually came across that bot years ago, and I learned a fair amount of it, and it actually inspired some of my own trading. So I do think Greg really knows what he's doing, and I've learned a lot from just kind of watching his work over the years, be it what to do, but also perhaps what to avoid, which is something you should always do when evaluating other developer strategies because you can usually learn something. So here, like, he is using candle formations and a few different filters. And specifically, he is trading volatility. So my understanding with this style of bot is that he's looking for big candles. And that's initially how kind of I learned the concept of big candles in algo trading is from Greg. Because I noticed that he was always using like some sort of big candle based trigger and a whole bunch of different filters like ADX, moving averages, and I think he has his custom force index. And it's pretty clever, and it actually does result in a system that does work. He's also using usually a time-based filter. So like for instance, he's only allowing trading during the European and the US session, which also makes sense because you're looking for the volatility. My one kind of qualm with this is there's potentially quite a bit of overfitting risk here. Oh. So now going quickly, sorry, something was beeping in the background. Going here quickly to the signals, we can see that so far he's been getting really, really good results, and he's been running this bad boy from this time last year, and he's made over 1,000% returns. He initially deposited 7,500 euros and has made over 48,000 euros, so it's actually really impressive. And I believe Global Markets is quite a solid broker too. So this is genuinely very, very impressive. So clearly it's showing that he has had pretty good results to date. One thing to note though is you never know how many signals people have, but because he's actually playing with some pretty sizable amount of money here, like this is rather legitimate. So if we go into the actual trading history, I'm curious to see if this is a cent account or if this is a real account. Let's just check this here real quick. GoldX Global Markets, because I am always skeptical if I see an $80,000 trading balance, particularly if you're seeing some sort of like higher like risk strategy. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to pause the video and I'm going to go and ask ChatGPT if this is a cent account, just so we can get a bit more information. Okay, so now coming back to ChatGPT, I've been doing some poking around, and Global Markets does appear to be a FCA regulated broker, which is pretty impressive. And at the same time, apparently it's not a cent account, so maybe I'm missing something, but from what I can see, we'll give Greg here the benefit of the doubt and assume that he's actually trading with real money here, which is pretty impressive. So you never know for sure because these numbers are so big, but he does appear to be withdrawing a fair amount as well. But the fact that he's taking like a $7,000 loss on one day, like that's pretty hefty. So for now, let's say like benefit of the doubt, he's not doing so, but frankly, like, you never know because it's quite a bit of money to be trading in with this kind of strategy. So maybe somebody who has a bit more context in the broker can fill me in there. So here, now let's go and actually run a quick back test. I ran so on Vantage. As you can see, it is actually doing exactly what he says it's doing. There's different filters here. It is a big candle-based trigger, right? Like you can see that after these big candles, he is entering with a position, and he also is using a recovery style system. Where we look here, like after taking a loss on the next one, he just massively scales the lot size. And yeah, so that's kind of his classic recovery system. The issue is that like if he has multiple losses in a row, and he keeps scaling the lot size, it actually can cause issues, just to move my head. That can cause issues because then you can have these heftier losses. But overall, it looks very similar to many of his strategies in the past where he is using that style of like real trigger, like a real trigger, which is a real strategy. But at the same time, he is being quite aggressive with the recovery system. And I guess here, if we go into the lot sizing and are we able to actually turn off the recovery, starting risk amount, increase factor, here we go. So here, if you want to not actually use the recovery function, we can simply set this to 1, because currently what it's doing is, I guess because he has a 4-to-1 inverted risk reward, if he takes a loss in the next trade, he's simply going to go in and quadruple the lot size. So if we remove that, what ultimately happens? Okay, so this is what we get if we remove the recovery function. So it's still actually a profitable system, just not nearly as good. So that actually makes perfect sense to me. And here, if we go and we look through the deals, we can see a very consistent lot sizing based on the balance. So yes, this is very much a real trading system. Like clearly, like it is making money. This is an EV positive, profitable system, and there is a very real strategy behind it. And it's actually good that we're seeing this because it means there's likely minimal amounts of manipulation. However, in his recommended settings, he is using a fair amount of leverage through a recovery system, which is just something to be very mindful of because I have been burned using this exact kind of strategy in the past. Many people have because like previous distributions of trades, so orders of winners and losers, unfortunately does not always hold constant. So from what I can see, definitely a real system, it's a real bot here. Just be careful with the recovery function if you decide to use that. So guys, hope you enjoyed my video, and I'll see you in the next one.